Good
Live.
evening.
Good evening. Johnston County and Bradley County representing. Greg and Jeff here to give y'all the hi hat.
Did
I
you
just
did you
took
like
that bitch.
yeah. I provided visual cues on that one, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
Mr. Jeff,
Yes.
how was your day today?
A little crazy. Raleigh's getting horrible. I had some appointments in Raleigh this morning. Have you been to the new North Hills since they did it and created that mini community or whatever? It's like 10 blocks of a big city town. There's shops and like a 10 block area with like bowling alley, grocery store, all kind of shops you can think of, businesses, offices, apartments, like high rise apartments. I mean, it's all fancy, like upscale stuff.
Well, it was starting to get. I mean, this was like eons ago. It was starting to get that way back in the late '90s, anyway.
Yeah, and it's all that, and then it's like kind of like threw up across the street too. So, it's enormous complex, and when you go there and you spend any time there, I mean, it literally feels like you're in New York or something. I mean, it's like you can't find anywhere to park. You have to walk everywhere, across parking lots and all that shit. But
Now, North Hills, is that
uh,
where like Six Forks?
anyway.
Is that Six Forks Road?
Yeah, right there at Six Forks across from the old North Hills Mall, which is
Yeah.
all but abandoned now, and then you've got the new gentrified area
Well,
that's
malls
taken
are.
its place,
Yeah,
basically.
I'm surprised that hasn't been turned into something else, because malls have
Yeah,
been a dying breed
I'm
for
sure it
at
will
least
be soon.
10, 15 years.
Yeah, they'll probably demolish it and put apartments in there. Ooh, hot off the presses. Thanks, honey. Some material for the show and these sticky white hands.
Yeah. Ew. It's,
Hmm. How
no.
about yourself? Did you have a good day?
It,
I
it
mean, just
was.
Raleigh traffic sucks.
Well, it's always sucked. I mean,
Well,
stuck for 30 years,
it
except.
sucks times 10 now.
But no, day off was good. I played in
Oh,
the
that's right.
garden a
It's your
little bit.
Sunday.
Yeah, it's my Sunday. And played in the garden a little bit. We're getting some stuff in. I will give you some. Would you like some gardening advice? I can give it.
Always, because we're getting ready to do some tomatoes.
See, our tomatoes didn't do as well as we thought. But if you're going to grow hot peppers, please wear gloves when you're cutting them up, because for some reason I like to grow hot peppers. I just like to do that. And I've got a huge Carolina Reaper plant.
Me too, buddy. Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead. I was talking
You
about
thought
something else.
I know what you thought I was going to say, and you were going to come in and you were going to zing. I see. That's how long I've known you. Do you want me to go ahead and say I have a huge Carolina Reaper bush, and you were going to okay? But when you do that, when
We
you
are we are
when you,
kids of the 80s.
oh my God, we're like 12 years old now. But no, what
Oh,
I
go
did,
ahead.
that they're starting to come in. They're ripe and they're starting to come in, and I like to cut them up and dry them and put them in food to torture myself. But when you cut peppers, wear gloves,
Yeah,
because my dumbass just started cutting peppers, these Carolina Reapers, and I cut them up and I put them in the dehydrator, and I knew enough to wash my hands, and I washed them for like 3-4 minutes, and I've been that stuff gets on my skin. It gets on your skin, and it does not go away quickly. And so every time I put my hand in water, it'll flare back up again. And
yeah, you've got to
so,
put something on it now that I'm thinking about it.
I mean,
Oh,
you
and
got to
don't
put
rub your
gloves on. I was dumb enough. I didn't use gloves. If you used
yeah,
gloves, I would have been okay.
and don't
But
rub your eyes.
don't go to the bathroom.
Yeah. Oh, one or two. God, two's probably worse. I just thought of that. Good
Yeah.
gracious, that would be horrible. Yeah. Somebody
uh,
tells you, you got a hot ass. You bet you, I
you,
do. You don't
literally,
even
yes.
know. And
But no,
then if you ate them too, you got it coming from both ends.
well, you got hot lava coming and going is basically what happens. Goes down like hot lava, comes out like hot lava. So
Yeah, I think you might want to look this up just to check it, but I think like it's either vinegar. I think vinegar will neutralize it. Like if you just put some
dairy
vinegar,
products,
like yeah.
dairy
But
products.
yeah, milk costs more than gas though, I might say. You might not want to do that. Or go get
Mm.
some Dollar General milk and pour up.
Ah, the cure is worse than the disease in that part.
Yeah. The famine.
No, that's
You remember
okay.
the famine?
I'll live with the stirring pain in my ass rather than drink Dollar General milk.
All right,
But
enough
no,
with the
that was
lighthearted
pretty
break
much
the ice.
well, that was pretty much the highlight of my day. I played in the garden a
So
little
did you
bit.
go
Did
to the
some.
bathroom? So you haven't been to the bathroom since you cut peppers up?
I just did it. I
You don't
didn't.
have to
Not
answer
number
that
two.
question. The
No.
question was funny enough.
Yeah, yeah. I was.
All right.
I was handless pretty much today.
We've
My aim had to be true today. Let's put it that way.
got no hands, Cotton. All right. Enough of the lighthearted banter. Um, let's. We're continuing a topic, and we may need to continue it for another episode after this one. I don't know. We'll see. But last week we were talking about essentially college football. I mean, all college sports are affected by it, certainly, but mostly football is the driving force in all this. And the expansion news, teams changing conferences, conferences that have existed for 50 to 60 years, essentially like poof, they're gone. It's been some crazy stuff. And I mean, there's so many different topics and everything. And last week, I think felt like we were a little bit all over the place with it. And I think we kind of need
It's
to
like
like
the
focus it
process.
to the things that matter to us because those are the things that we want to talk about. And number one is the ACC and its future, and then the rest is pretty much everybody else. But before we go any further, and I don't want to monopolize the conversation, I just want to say, as a lifelong NC State fan and alum, there's I don't want to say hatred, but at least some vitriol or venom towards the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Not so much, you might be surprised, as a sports rival or fans of UNC, more of a, like institutional things, but I won't even get into that. But I'm not even going. I had a list prepared, but I'm not even going to say it. So,
Wow,
in my
wow, your
book,
hatred runs deep.
yeah, the UNC Board of Governors, who basically tried to bury NC State back in the Valvano era, um, have actually come back and like made peace with me to a certain degree. And we'll get into more of this later. And it's just what I'm saying is when you're looking at the two big pickers, and those are the two conferences that seem to be in control of college football, the Big Ten and the Southeastern Conference, are basically cherry picking what's left of the best in college football right now. And there's not very many like really great national name brands out there. I mean, there may be 10, you could argue more or whatever. But who's to say why don't they go and grab the rest of them? And one of the biggest ones on that list, and I would probably venture to argue that the number one team on the teams that are out there still available to go somewhere else is UNC Chapel Hill. National brand, huge national following, the Michael Jordan ties, tons of money, tons of eyes. I mean, I give them all the credit in the world. They have built that and maintained that. So kudos to them. So, but the UNC Board of Governors, I don't know if it's kind of secret or not, have basically said that neither UNC or NC State are leaving the ACC unless the other is secure. Not necessarily going to the same conference, but they got to make sure that the other is in a big time deal as well. So it's almost as if they're a package deal in order for them to approve a move to the Big Ten or SEC or whatever. And the Big 12 is still not a slouch either. But with that move, I mean, it essentially saves NC State's bacon. You know what I mean? They're not going to be left out.
No.
So you see Clemson and Florida State, really pushing the conference to do something or they're going to leave. UNC is the other one. And, NC State's just going to do whatever UNC wants. You know what I mean?
Yep.
However, they want them to vote on things, whatever, because they're paired at the hip. I think it's a great idea because I think NC State deserves to go somewhere else just as much as UNC. I mean, granted, I'm a homer, but I think both of those teams are going to be fine. I really do. Whatever happens, whether ACC survives or both of them move on to the same or different bigger conferences, I think it'll be fine. I'm not worried about the future of those two schools. Everybody else and every other team in North Carolina I'd be concerned with, and ECU is just going to be buried and buried and buried. And I hate to see it. I mean, because I actually
Yeah.
have a affinity for them too.
Now, to interject real quick, there was a team that we in North Carolina we hadn't really talked about in all this seismic shift of landscape is Appalachian State. Appalachian
Hmm.
State has done very well stepping up from, I guess, Division 2 to the Division 1. I know that's not what you call them anymore, but when they stepped up
Yeah.
and played with the big boys, they joined the Sun Belt, and they have done very well football wise. And I think if I think Appalachian State should be something that, especially the SEC, could potentially look into. I don't know if they are or not,
Oh
but
man.
I mean that brand has only grown. Now I'm not saying it's to the level of a UNC, but over the course of the
I'm
last
just
20 years, it's
the
grown.
only thing that, yeah, I mean, in terms of football, I mean, I think there's something there. I mean, I think they deserve in football better than even the Sun Belt Conference. Maybe the American or something like that. Um,
Well, I
they
would put the
deserve to
Sun
be in a
Belt and
better.
the American on
But I mean, I
even
don't,
level.
I don't think App State would even be like competitive in a big name conference in any other sport but football. I mean, it would be horrible.
Yeah.
Um, So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, from football, I mean, there's a lot of great little football conferences. I love Mountain West football. I
Hmm.
watch American Athletic Conference games. I think they're fantastic. I like watching some MAC games sometimes. I mean, I watch all of college football. I love it all. I mean, it's one of my favorite sports. I mean, in the fall on Saturdays, you got football from noon till 2 o'clock in the morning if you want it,
Right.
and I'll do it sometimes.
Yeah.
So
I've
I
been
don't
down
I
to
don't
like
know,
sit
but I
on the
mean,
TV all day and night.
yeah, yep, absolutely, or at least have it on as a background. There's
Yeah.
always the best game's always on, and you're accompanying your day, whatever you're doing. But here's the thing, all right, because everybody talks about the ACC survival. I mean, I love the ACC. Um, I think that they've done a wonderful job, and I kind of like what the ACC tries to do or like puts out there as like their thing to be like kind of the academic, standard of all the Power Five conferences. Maybe so, maybe not. I mean, whatever. But I think that they at least try a little bit harder to keep the tie to an educational institution than the other Power Five schools do, aside from certain teams, obviously. But still, I mean, but all conferences have their good and bad examples there. Um, but you know, I mean, they just haven't kept up. I mean, all these teams that have left for other conferences, they were there for the picking in the past. I mean, the ACC was flat out run into the ground by John Swofford. And the guy we have now is not doing, I mean, I don't think it's any better. I mean, it's just poor leadership, just archaic thinking, no foresight whatsoever. I mean, it's why the ACC is where it's at. And that's why the big name teams in the conference are pissed off and want to leave. Um, I don't know what the future holds. If it somehow works out and they can remain competitive and maybe the third or fourth best conference in college football and still sustain, competitiveness with the other conferences, great. But I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of leaning that I hope the best of the ACC disbands and goes somewhere else. I think Florida State would be better. I think Clemson would be better for it. I certainly think Carolina and State in the long haul would be better for it. I think Carolina's perfect place would be the Big Ten. I don't know if that is for NC State. NC State's might be the Big 12. I don't know. I haven't really put that much thought about a destination other than, they need a little bit better. Both programs do than what they have now. And I'm just thinking in the long future. I mean, really, screw the rest of the ACC. If we can get out and make our deal and get out of this that tie-in. What do they call it?
The media rights.
The contract. Yeah. Well,
And
not the media rights. The thing that holds the conference together, where you can't leave without paying like $120 million or something.
that's part of it. Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's part of that contract. So far as
Yeah.
the exit fee is 120, and then kind of the media. The It seems like the conference controls each how much revenue and each television the rights of each school's television, the money that they get from that, instead of having the teams go out, the individual institutions going out and making their own deals. So far as like TV
Yeah.
money is concerned, that's what Texas did. That's what Notre Dame did. Um, it seems to me that this whole contract, so far as like the money from TV rights, it seemed like the ACC, the leadership, panicked during the first round of conference realignment when you had Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC, or you had even back when like Nebraska joined the Big Ten, and all that stuff. I think they panicked, and I think they locked everybody who was in the conference. Then said, "Okay, we're going to lock up our conference and make sure nobody leaves." But then they didn't have the foresight to kind of go after some of these other teams because they thought logistics or anything like that. And while it seemed like the Big Ten and the SEC was like they just took advantage and said, okay, well, the ACC is kind of walled up here, and
Mm-hmm.
they just looked west, and it was like almost like a two-pronged attack. I mean, the Big Ten swoops in and plucks four, and then the Big 12 comes in and plucks four more. Meanwhile, you had the Texas and Oklahoma from the Big 12 going to the SEC, and it's like one big massive money land grab. And meanwhile, the SEC,
Mm-hmm.
I mean the ACC, is holed up in a garrison. And now that the dust is starting to settle a little bit, the ACC are left with like leftovers and like nothing. The only teams that they can
Yeah.
even try to get is like like we talked about last week. Excuse me, Stanford and Cal. Yeah, academically they'd be great, but it does nothing to generate revenue. and that's
Yeah,
left
and here
them.
we go right now. I feel like not to interrupt you, but I got to make two key points here about things that I'm pissed off at the ACC about. Number one being was that the entire Pac-12 was out there sitting for the taking.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to talk about getting Notre Dame to join the ACC full-fledged in football. The ACC could have easily gone out to the West Coast and gotten USC, UCLA, Cal, and Washington and invited all four of them to join the ACC. And doing that, there's a couple of natural rivalries already in there. Notre Dame probably would have joined the freaking league, and then the ACC would have been
USC
set.
and Notre
You have
Dame.
your yeah, there you go. I mean,
If
and then
if
in
you would have,
USC
if
and
the ACC
Clemson,
would have
USC and
gotten,
Florida, UCLA too. I mean, we
yeah,
could have done that, and that would have. I mean, that for sure. I mean, for sure, we could have worked out a deal there. And the second thing that I'm pissed off about, um, damn, I already forgot. But while I'm trying to think of that, I'm gonna say screw Notre Dame too for trying to to hold the ACC hostage. Now, I'm actually a Notre Dame fan. I like Notre Dame. I actually pull for Notre Dame in football. I know a lot of people don't like them and hate them just for their reputation and they're overrated all the time. I get all of that. I understand. I'm just kind of like a nostalgia guy when it comes to that. And my high school uniform kind of looked like theirs. So that's all there is to that. But I mean, screw them. I mean, Notre Dame, basically, to use an analogy, is the biggest dick tease there ever was. I mean, the ACC is just like some young teenage guy who's never been laid, and Notre Dame is the hottest chick in school or whatever, and they come to the ACC and they're all over him and smooch him and stuff. And they let him do some stuff, yeah, we'll play baseball with you. Yeah, we'll play, basketball with you, but we're not going all the way. Home base is football joining too. And it keeps like, well, if you do this for me the way I want you to do this, then I don't know, maybe one day we might go to bed together so screw them. I mean, it really, at this point, the big six or whatever need to say Virginia, Virginia Tech, Florida State, Clemson State, and North Carolina and say, screw you, Notre Dame. We're leaving this conference unless you join it. Put it back on them.
yeah,
You know what I mean? We need to get tough with some of these. Oh, I remember what I was going to say, what pissed me off about the ACC too. Back a few years ago when we were reworking our TV deal, this is what John Swofford did to the schools at ACC. Not only did he get a deal together where the new deal that we were making was already less money than the SEC and Big Ten were making
mm-hmm.
per school. So he makes a deal, and these guys have their TV deals coming up the next year or so. So they're going to get even more money. So it's already known. So he comes back to all the teams in the ACC and says, hey, this is the best that we can do. And not only on top of that, you have to accept it and sign this deal where it's financially impossible for you to leave the conference
Yeah,
for 12 years. And
yeah,
you have to sign it now. And so, I mean, that's why a lot of these schools are pissed off now. They knew it was a bad deal at the time. They knew it would get worse, and they've done nothing to try to fix it.
yeah.
So, I mean, that's
Not
why we
even
are
try
where
to
we are.
put forth a new contract. Hey, the landscape has changed. Things have changed. We need to do a new contract. They and I think I was referred to earlier. I think the ACC panicked. I think the leadership panicked and tried to lock
Hmm.
everybody down and saying, you've got to sign this. We got to stick together. We got to, But the deal was horrible, and the exit fee was so, and on top of that, I said, okay, if you want to leave, we're going to make you pay. It's going to hurt to leave,
Hmm.
and in some sense, I mean, I don't. To be for sure, Clemson is looking at this. It's like Florida State's president said this said the silent part out loud. That's what and Clemson is probably looking at all this, and you know, and quite frankly, if Florida State was to leave, I wouldn't blame them. Bye, good riddance, whatever. You've got a good brand, but you haven't been relevant, for at least 10 years, and now you're just now starting to get back to being competitive again. Meanwhile, Clemson, I'm sure, is looking at this and goes, you know what? we've been propping this conference up football wise for at least 10 years, and nobody else has really
Maybe.
stepped up and given us a fight, really. And so
But
for
yeah, I know, and that's probably the main reason they've been a national title picture so much, because the Clemson in the ACC, that is the one that's even won even national championships. Did they even get there in those same years playing in the SEC when every week you're playing a powerhouse?
yeah,
I mean, it's all great, but look, I think where we need to go here is like, let's talk about the people that um, control college football right now, the Big Ten and the Southeastern Conference. Do you think that those two conferences are legitimately and actively working on getting other schools in? And we'll start with the Big Ten, which is now at 18 teams. Is that right? Let me look it up here. I
something
might
like
need to put my
that.
glasses on for this. Yeah, let's see here. One, two, three, four, five, six,
I think
seven.
it
No,
is
they're at
18 teams.
14.
No, they're 18.
They're
I
going to
think.
be 18.
Yeah, and then SEC is 16.
That's right.
Yeah, no,
hmm
they are. they're they're always looking at more schools. Both powerhouse conferences are. Um, I'm sure the SEC, especially to keep it somewhat geographically intact. The Big Ten has said, "Screw it, we're going to be coast to coast," and they have. The
Yeah.
SEC is trying to pick teams that are more in their region that they could pluck, and that's why I think Clemson and Florida State. It's not going to be but so much longer, and they're going to. Both of them are definitely going to join the SEC, um, and
Yeah. I know
probably
the
Miami too.
biggest thing. I say that, but I'm telling you, I'm going to tell you some things that I've heard. Now, it seems like based on the reps of the schools and everything like that, the perfect fit for Florida State, um, Clemson, and Miami would be the Southeastern Conference. That's just my opinion. Other people may
I agree.
differ, but um, Florida, who has a lot of pull in the Southeastern Conference, doesn't want another Florida school in the Southeastern Conference. They feel like they kind of have an advantage over the other schools because they're the only one in the Southeastern Conference. Plus, it doesn't really bring in any more eyes since Florida already has the state covered for SEC football. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And South Carolina definitely does not want Clemson to come into the
No.
conference. Not that they have any like really pull or anything. And of course, Miami. Granted, that's a big audience. I think Miami
I,
is
yeah.
probably more um, of a draw for the SEC because Florida being at one end of the state, Miami to the other, but Miami's got a huge market. So you know, but then again, they have no fan base. So there you go. If you could switch location, if you could switch Florida State to Miami to Tallahassee, it might work out and be the perfect school for the SEC, but I don't know. But
And,
the Big
and
Ten, I can tell
real
you
quick to
that they've
interject on
been.
the. Oh, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I wanted to interject real quick on the Florida before you move on to the Big Ten. And one of the selling
hmm
points that you could have made if they were in different conferences, the Florida teams were in different conferences, is that now they will be able to play each other, but they already play each other. Florida State already plays Miami and Florida already plays Florida State. It's that whole interstate rivalry, so that would take away some of the allure of having the jump conferences.
hmm
Mm.
I mean, I agree with you there. I mean, there's already a rivalry there, and it's one of the things that makes it rivalry are their different conferences. I mean, you're
Yeah.
almost like, Florida State's representing the ACC and Florida the Southeastern Conference, and they're going to get together. Hey, look, you can just look at the ACC in itself, and Florida State and Miami is nowhere near the rivalry that it used to be
No.
in comparison. I mean, because the cool thing about it was back in the day, I mean, when the Big East actually, does the Big East even, they have basketball still, right?
That's it.
Big
I
East,
mean, they've got
yeah,
they have baseball and
like
other wonderful,
Providence and shit.
and
Yeah,
but they have
yeah, but see, that's a
there's
football
primarily
conference that
basketball.
is all. Yeah, it wasn't what, maybe 25 years ago. The Big East was a pretty darn good football conference, you know,
Yeah.
and then it doesn't even exist anymore. But you know, it was a different style of play. Like Florida played SEC football, and Florida State, which was an independent for a long time, before joining the ACC. I mean, they all play different styles of football, so it was fun to see how the different conference type plays, you know, played against each other.
Hmm.
But getting back to what I was saying before, and I know you're a UNC guy, but the biggest prize that the Big Ten has had on, I know for the last 10 years, they've had a hard on for them. They want UNC bad. They want the market, the North Carolina market. They want UNC because they think it would like completely upgrade their basketball league to be like the premier basketball league, you know, and arguably, you know, football as well. And in football, Carolina is always going to be big enough to field a competitive football team. I just want to see what you would think about that move for Carolina, and you know, if the ACC is going to disband. I mean, obviously, the best thing is the ACC to stay together, and we get another deal worked out where we're at least somewhat more competitive with the other two big leagues. But if that's not going to happen, and UNC has to go somewhere, what do you think about Big Ten, and what do you think about other places if that's not
I
the one?
I think as an overall package, if you want to talk football and basketball, UNC does make a better choice for the Big Ten. Big Ten would be, you're right, they would gladly, in a heartbeat, welcome UNC, and of course you'd have to bring state along with you. Um, but so far as like if they wanted to do a basket, just purely a basketball with a halfway kind of sort of decent football team, if I'm the Big Ten, I'd be looking at Duke more so than Carolina. Carolina, other than that, flash in the pan they had last year, Carolina basketball is not what it once was. It is a shell. They're living. They're living off the past. I mean, the brand is still there,
Hmm.
but when you see recruits, and I see it in news headlines or in articles all the time, you see some big recruit, especially in basketball. You see some big recruit, and you see their short list. All right, Duke is always there. Kentucky is always there. UNC is there a decent amount of time, but they're not getting the recruits. And this has gone on for like
Hmm.
over 10 years now. I would say since the 2000s at least. Um, they're not getting the recruits. So that means, yeah, they're in the conversation so far as the NCAA tournament, but then Duke has done so much more with recruiting than Carolina has. I mean, if I'm the Big Ten, if you can't get Carolina, go for Duke. Duke would fit in really well in Big
I
Ten
mean, from
country,
basketball, yeah, I agree
and
wholeheartedly. But I
and
mean,
their and
Duke,
their and their
and
football
even with,
team is so. I mean, they're not as good as say Wisconsin, but they're not as bad as Rutgers. Let's put it that way. They would be middle of the pack.
well, who is? God, I mean, Rutgers has got to be like, you know, the luckiest team on the planet, or them in
Oh
Maryland, as far as that goes.
yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean? For being in the Big Ten. I mean, I saw an article earlier this week talking about, despite all the money, how Rutgers sports, um, all their programs are just struggling just to keep up. I mean, they just can't. I mean, they have no reputation, and they've, you know, set the
yeah,
standard for themselves as bottom of the barrel.
yeah.
I don't know what's the future. I don't know. I know Maryland's not happy,
And the thing about it is,
that they're not doing better.
when you mentioned Maryland, it jogged my memory because Maryland used to be in the ACC. They left.
Yeah.
to join the
And
Big
we
Ten.
said good riddance.
Yeah,
You
pretty
idiot.
much. Yeah,
You're just going
and
to be buried. And they pretty much are for the most part,
basketball they're a little
buried
bit
in
competitive, but
at best.
nothing else.
Yeah. And they've had some flashes in football. I'm giving credit where credit's due, but for the most part, it's been a, middling or worse for the most part in everything for them. So
Well,
it's
see,
it's
here's the
it's
thing:
not going to be an easy transition.
they were a middling in the ACC anyway, and then now they're a middling in the Big Ten, and they're getting more money because
Yeah.
the Big
But
Ten
the
has
thing
been the
about
leadership
Duke,
has been that proactive and that forward thinking. Um, yeah, I'm sure Maryland counts as lucky stars that they left the ACC and joined the Big Ten.
yeah, but the thing about Duke, and I mean I agree with you, they got a huge national audience when it comes to basketball. But there's one thing about it that the people are not looking at is that Coach K doesn't coach there anymore. I mean, he's the reason, big reason for, the eyes and his national exposure and all that. And he's not there anymore. So there's not as many eyes on Duke basketball as there used to be. And the type of person that was like just a casual basketball fan and says, oh, hey, I'll pull for Duke because they win all the time. I mean, you're not going to see that as much anymore. I mean, because you don't have all those things that tie it together. And Duke, with their basketball, is kind of like Appalachian State with their football. I mean, granted, the football team's not that bad, but more times than not, they're on the bottom end of the conference. And baseball, granted, they almost went to the World Series this year, but again, the baseball team, even most part, is on the lower side of the league in ACC. They have no alumni fan base whatsoever. I mean, what they have like what 1,000 or 2,000 graduates every year. I mean, Wake Forest, the same thing. I mean, there's outside of this sole exception of Coach K and Duke national basketball brand in the past. I mean, they really don't bring anything unless you just bring. I mean, even they don't have the audience in North Carolina. I mean, if you bring them in, you would be drawing like a speckles of national audience from them. You don't bring a whole region with you. I mean, the whole state of North Carolina is not going to be, oh, Duke's our team now because they're in the. I mean, a vast majority of people in North Carolina are State, Carolina, ECU, and App State as far as sports fans go. And that's pretty much it. I mean, granted, there's some others, but still, you know what
Now,
I'm trying to say.
it's gonna
But,
it's gonna be interesting to see if
I think that
With Coach K leaving, it's going to be interesting to see if they parallel what Carolina did after Dean Smith left, because quite frankly, Carolina has been kind of trending slowly, if not, but definitely trending downwards as far as competitiveness. Meanwhile, in the
I,
span that
I,
since Dean Smith left, Coach K, how long did Coach K coach after Dean Smith stepped down? What, another
what,
20
I don't even
years?
know. Yeah, when I don't even remember when Smith retired. What year did he retire? Was it early 90s? When did Roy Williams? No, we had to go to Matt Doherty too, and then
Well,
Roy.
see, Matt Doherty
Was
was
it mid
coach for 20
95?
years. I mean, not bad, but Roy Williams coached at Carolina, believe it or not, like 20 years. He was there for 20
Yeah, I
years.
think it was 25 year. 25 almost.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
it was a
and
long
so,
time.
from the time Smith left, Coach K was still coaching, and he coached and he built and he built
Hmm.
and he built. Now I'm wondering if now that Duke is, and I think Duke is just as much of a, if not more of a brand now, at least basketball wise, as Carolina. In fact, I think they've surpassed them, and I think they have done that for
Yeah,
quite a while. Now it's going to be interesting to see
yeah.
what Schreier
Okay, let
does.
me tell you that. Look, well, you just said that, but I think you give Duke more credit than they deserve because I'm going to tell you one reason why. You take UNC rivalry against Duke out of the equation. I'm just saying, just in basketball, what does Duke got? Nothing.
You're right. They don't have much. I mean, they. I'm not going to sit here and
Hmm.
say that they're the. I'm not saying they're the best all around, so far as all the sports, in order for them to join, to be somebody's prize, such as the Big Ten or the SEC. But
Hmm.
I don't think Carolina is really that much ahead of them. Man, I mean, you could
I
take.
do.
I I, I don't know. I don't know.
You have no idea how big Carolina sports is, man. You got to
I
look into the numbers when we get off the phone.
yeah.
I'm talking about ratings and all that shit because they are. They just are. I mean, you know, it's not easy for me to like be this brutally honest about UNC's brand, but it is enormous. It just is, man. It is huge, enormous. It's, I think, in my opinion, they're the biggest prize still out there, most coveted one still out there. And as soon as
I
they can
don't
find a
disagree.
way to get
I
out,
don't.
they should. How do you feel about it? I mean, if you had your preference, let's just say Notre Dame completely joins the ACC. We bring in a couple more schools. I don't know. Let's say we bring in Stanford and Cal and maybe a Texas school, maybe SMU, and that'll give us to 18 or whatever. And maybe we can somehow get Kansas or something too for to help with the basketball rivalries or what, and we'll get to 20 schools. Would you prefer that, an ACC kind of being like the third or fourth best conference, or would you prefer to see Duke and State in the Big Ten? I mean, based on where college football is going. And another thing I
And
want to say, I
which
mean, you take,
I
go
was
ahead.
going to
Let's just
say
talk about this.
no, I don't. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step up. And so far as the overall college sports landscape, while it's nice to have a strong basketball, um, it's nice to have a strong basketball, um, conference, but the main revenue maker is football. And and conferences are going to look, which would allude to the Big Ten going after UNC rather than Duke, and I totally agree with that. But football is what brings in the money. ACC would not.
Hmm.
Yeah, Kansas basketball would be nice. It would be good games to watch. You would see your Kansas Dukes every year, or your Kansas UNCs
Hmm.
every year in basketball. But that's not what drives in the revenue.
And and Stanford, in all fairness, I mean, Stanford and Cal don't have tiny audiences, and they're typically pretty good in all sports too. I mean, they are solid programs. You know, they're not bad. Um, I mean, I
But they're
think they
not.
would fit in for the type of level that the rest of the ACC is in. They'd fit right in, and you know, they would be right on par with anybody else in the conference. I would say even the top half of the conference, probably on
What?
a consistent
Cal?
basis. Yeah,
Cal?
Cal and Stanford both. Yeah.
Cal has been horrible
In the
for a long
ACC?
time
Yeah.
academically.
Yeah.
I'm not academic, but athletically. Now, granted, I mean, that's the only reason why you would even think of bringing Stanford and Cal into the ACC would be for academic prestige. They
Hmm.
they do
What
not drive the needle. They do not bring in the football, which is what the
they
bottom
bring
line
well,
is. They don't bring in the football revenue
I'm
that's
just saying,
needed to make up the gap.
they bring you, what they do bring is a West Coast audience. I mean, what would have been fantastic would to bring all four of those guys on the West Coast to the ACC: Washington, USC, UCLA, and Stanford. Not
But
and
it's
Cal. Yeah, five.
I think you're overestimating.
Those five. Yeah.
I think you're overestimating just how big of the market or the eyeballs that Cal and Stanford would bring in. I mean, you don't see your
Oh, I'm
football
not
game of the
saying
week
it's like, oh
between
yeah.
Cal and Washington State. You don't. The only time
Oh,
you
it's
really
about
see
it's
Stanford is when they play USC or UCLA
or Notre Dame.
or Notre Dame. it's not because of Stanford. Stanford's not bringing in
Hmm.
the eyeballs. It's Notre Dame that's bringing in the eyeballs. It's USC. It's Oregon when they played those teams.
Hmm.
Now, granted, and you have to be competitive. And ever since Andrew Luck left, they've really gone into the crapper so far as being competitive. And I don't think that bringing and there's nothing on the horizon that says that Stanford's going to rise back up to competitive prominence. So if you bring Stanford and Stanford could be a mid-tier, middle of the conference, competitive maybe, but Cal, especially football, which is what drives the dollars, Cal would be horrible. I mean, you would. I mean, and who's going to
Well,
watch Boston College and Cal? Nobody.
no, I mean nobody. But I'm just saying is like Cal. I mean, look, I'll put it to you this way: Cal has a big audience as far as ratings of watching their sports. They have a lot of alumni, have a lot of people really proud of that school. So even if they're not winning, they bring the audience with them. I mean, I'm not saying that they're on par with like a Carolina or a Michigan or somebody like that. But I mean, they're on par with like Louisville and NC State, which are like, routinely in the top 25 of like ratings. Um, in college football. I don't know if you knew that or not, but Cal's up there. They're actually Cal has better ratings than Stanford does overall. But I think what they would bring is like a renegotiation of the deal that you've got some West Coast teams, but you can't just bring on two because it's not fair to them because they're constantly flying east to play. If you'd have brought four or five schools from the West Coast, that makes sense. You've got your little West Coast wing of the ACC where they can always play a round robin against each other and then throw in two or three, four East Coast games or maybe Notre Dame or whatever. Who doesn't mind? They'll travel anywhere because they get paid. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. It just seems like at this point, in my opinion, it's just crap. I mean, you may differ,
Yeah.
but I think the best I think the best deal we could possibly see for the schools that we like is that NC State and UNC become the 20th members, 19th and 20th members of the Big Ten, and they finish it up with us in there. Because, you know, from a basketball standpoint, instantaneously, both those schools, I think, are competitive. I think NC State is coming back around finally. And Carolina's always going to be there. And then in football, I mean, it ain't going to be easy, but I think both of the schools are capable of competing and even competing for conference championships every once in a while in the Big Ten. Because, if State and Carolina go to the Big Ten, Clemson and Florida State, Miami, Virginia Tech, they go maybe off somewhere else too. Maybe they get left behind. But when you think of NC State out on the recruiting trail or Carolina out on the recruiting trail in football, and, where we've routinely gotten beat from these big conferences coming in and picking schools, out of our state and in the region just because of the conference that they're in. Now we're that. Now, if NC State is going head to head with like, West Virginia now for a recruit, I was like, heck no, I'm gonna go play in the Big Ten. You know what I mean? I get to
Mhm.
play Michigan and Ohio State and Oregon every week. You know what I'm saying? It
I
makes them
will.
more appealing schools. There's going to be more eyes on them. I mean, they're going to be a
Yeah,
national stage every week you play
absolutely.
football. So I don't know.
I will say this: if Carolina and State, regardless of whether they go to the Big Ten or the SEC, if both of them leave, ACC is done. Then
Oh, if
If
one team
Clemson and
leaves
Florida
the
State hasn't
AC,
left by then, they will leave soon after. Let's put it that way.
yeah. If
The
if
ACC is done
one
and dusted.
team leaves, the AC is dead. Yeah, they're
And
dead. Oh, I think they already are dead.
I said
And
this.
in
I
fact,
think
I
I said
don't.
this last week that I think it's only a matter of time. I think the Barbarians are at the gate of the ACC, and they're just waiting for somebody to blink and pony up that 120 mil to get the heck out, whether it be
Hmm.
Clemson or Florida State. And I think while Florida State, the ACC may say good riddance, but that is a big brand. It may not be UNC big, but it's big enough to start the dominoes. And just like when UCLA and USC left to go to the Big Ten, that started the domino effect that brought down the Pac
Hmm.
12.
I just don't. I don't know. You know, I really, honestly, truly believe we're at the point here where the NCAA being the governing body over college football, those days in itself are numbered. It may be 5 years, it may be 10, but at some point, I think we're going to see like a break from college football and the NCAA. I think what we're going to see is, and we can get into this later because I know we're starting to run a little bit long, but I think you're going to see like football clubs. They're club sports in college right now with soccer and lacrosse and stuff all the time. And I think that's where we're going with college football too, is they're going to be football clubs, with the loose association with the school. They're just like a marketing branch of the school. I don't know, maybe they're students, maybe they're not. But and that's going to start pissing off that. We'll get into that another time. But I
The
think you'll
question
see
said
that.
when you
I think
said,
you'll see, like, go ahead.
oh, no, 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 I know. Just to interject, you brought up something that's very intriguing when you say it's like when you say clubs, because now,
Hmm.
granted, this is professional soccer we're talking about. Do you see
Sure.
do you see these schools possibly doing something similar to what the English Premier League or La Liga or Bundesliga? I think that's
Nah.
the German, where
What
you
what I
have
what
these
I
clubs that are. I know there's professional as opposed to you know amateur or college, but do you see these big conferences kind of forming something to that effect, where you have the English Premier
maybe. I
League?
mean, to a certain degree. Well, but they'll still have to be associated with the schools. I mean, because
Yeah,
that's the allegiances or what makes it. But I'm just saying that the NCAA wouldn't be the governing body. That like the schools themselves will come together and form a group of like how this club football participates, and I'm sure there'll be, rules about the kids have to be in school or not or whatever. I mean, that's it really irrelevant. What I'm saying is the NCAA has done it. I still think that, once all the big schools get together and form these clubs, what's left, there'll be this club football, the big college football that everybody watches, and then there'll be, still like what they consider NCAA college football with all the teams that got left out. Your East Carolinas, your Tulsas, and all those schools like that will still be playing, and they'll probably even play for a national championship. You know what I mean? And that kind of thing, which I think would be really cool. I'd be cool with all of that. At least it would be honest, and we wouldn't live with the constant hypocrisy that we've lived with our whole lives, that college sport is not a business. You know what I mean? At
yeah,
least they're being honest about it now, you know? So
right.
I'm cool. If that's where we're going, let's go there. And I'm sorry for all the schools that get left out, but I hope my school is included into the big times college sports. That's all I got to say. I'm too
If
old to like care about the rest of the league now.
Yeah,
I
I
want to
understand.
be able to have my team stay, at least have a chance at national relevance, even if they never have national relevance again.
And quite frankly, I think as long if you're a current student or if you're an alumni, as long as it's on TV, as long as they can broadcast the game, even if your team isn't going to make the national championship playoff or whatever, as long as they air the games, people will watch, people will go to them, people will buy the merchandise, and those teams that get left behind, yeah, they may not make mega bucks, but the schools will still function, the athletic department will still function, As long as they still play the games, people will watch. It's almost a Field of Dreams type thing. If you play it, they'll come, or if you build it, they will come. But if you play the games, people will come to watch. People will come to buy the tickets and the merchandise and support the school of their choice, whatever. As long as they keep playing, people will watch.
Hmm. It's true because I mean, I didn't go to East Carolina, but my daughter did, and I mean, growing up, my dad was like kind of it was his one of his teams was ECU. He just loved like the underdog story of them all the time.
Yeah,
So I've been like, ECU's like kind of been my second team, at least in football anyway. That's pretty much all. Well, they got a really good baseball team. Neither here nor there. Um, even now, if the ECU is playing UTEP, I'll put that game on. I mean, I'll
I
watch
will.
it, but
Yeah,
I'll put it on. You know what I mean? And if I'll follow enough to know how they're doing in the conference, and even though it's not my team, I'll be like, oh, cool, ECU is second or third place in the conference, or maybe leading the conference. I'm gonna really keep an eye on them because they're playing so well.
and I'm
And a
the
lot of
same.
people,
Yeah.
follow college, sports that way. They're not fanatics about it. They're just casual fans. So I definitely think there's a wonderful amounts of college football, even down Division 2 and 3. If you want to watch it, there's an audience for it. There's an audience for all of it. Well, I think where we're headed right now, as much as I've been mad about it and angry about it, it's we're getting to the point is like, you know what? The kids that are playing the sport and putting their lives on the line to entertain us are actually getting their share of the money now.
Yeah.
They're not being held hostage for basically what is their entertainment career, which is very short, to be held up in their development if they're stuck in you know, the depth chart somewhere at another school that they couldn't, it'd take 2 years to get a chance to make it at another school. You know what I'm saying? And now you don't have to sit out. I think that's cool. I hated that at first. But I mean, for the kids that actually playing the sports, it's really beneficial to them. And I really, really like the fact that we're taking the hypocrisy out of it and saying, you know what, there's a lot of money being made here.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And it's a business, and they need to run it like a business. I mean, it's business first, school second. That's where we're at.
Unfortunately,
That's what
that's where
it's
we are.
always been. We've taken it out of the shadows and we're doing it out in the front of people. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's going to happen. So you can either accept it or not. I mean, that's just my point of view.
And then, even if somebody, I got a feeling, even if somebody says, "Well, I don't like all this realignment, and I don't like all this," when it comes Saturday, and their team is playing, where are they going to be at? They're going to be either at the stadium or they're going to be parked on their couch watching on TV. As
Hmm.
long as you're able to see it, they're going to watch it. They may bitch, moan, and complain about the ways and this, that, and the other. But come Saturday, they just want to see the ball game. I just want to see,
Yeah.
this quarterback do, the hometown quarterback does well. I want to see my team do well. And so that's
Well,
and
if they're Maryland alums, they're in jail.
oh my goodness.
I had to get in there. I usually save that for somebody else, but it's all right. You got anything else you want to add? Because I think it's a good time to wrap this one up tonight,
I
buddy.
think so too. I mean, we could go round and round ad nauseum and dig up pie charts and graphs and this, that, and the other. But I think you know, I think this is a good stopping point.
Yeah, and we can talk a little bit more about. I mean, really, the only thing I think relevant of talking about is the like last, 5 to 8 teams is going to be picked up by SEC or Big Ten because that's really the only thing that's relevant. Because
And
nothing else is, in my opinion.
even more of an underlying thing, and we've touched on it like some episodes past. As long as the ticket cashes, people will watch
Hmm.
because, especially
Absolutely.
with sports betting and everything like that, more eyeballs are drawn to the TV who could care less about football 5 years ago. Now are
Yeah.
watching, as long as the ticket cashes, I'm going to watch this game.
Yeah. And another thing too, and we can talk about this another time. I mean, there are bubbles in real estate. There's bubbles in any kind of like investment type things. And, I think people have over invested in sports big time. Like the NFL and college football contracts that exist now are unimaginable. Um, I think that there's going to be a bubble that bursts with that at some point in terms of media deals and salaries to athletes. I could be wrong there, and it may not
But
be anything major, but I
it,
think we'll see a
it's
bubble burst at some point. Maybe
it,
before we croak, but I don't know.
yeah, it's millionaires arguing with billionaires. That's what it is. Because
Exactly.
as
That's a good
obscene
point.
as obscene as some of these contracts are for star players in the pros, um, it's nothing compared to what the owner draws in per year from that franchise. And the only thing that's
Hmm.
stopping the owner from like just emptying out their pocketbook is, in college football, I guess it's the NCAA, but in pros, it's the Shield, it's the
Hmm.
NFL, it's the organization says, okay, puts caps on everything where to keep franchises
Keep it competitive.
at least competitive, appear competitive at least. But that's that.
Hmm.
Well, when we get into pros and all that, that's another topic for another day. But essentially, that's what
Yeah.
millionaires arguing with billionaires over a pile of money.
God, I'm just thinking about it. We could literally turn this into a sports podcast if we wanted to. There's so many things to talk about right now. Yeah, we'll have to do maybe in the future like a sports segment, and we'll just fit something in every time. That's neither here nor there. And that's our business. It's not yours, audience. So don't you worry about it. Just thank you for watching. That's all we care. No matter what we say or what we put out there, just watch it and just soak it in and enjoy it. And then like it and then comment and then tell your friends about it and share it on Instagram and Twitter and all that shit.
You'll
That's
have
what you
nothing
need
that
to
like
do.
it.
And we'll worry about yeah, and we'll deal with show content. Damn it. Okay, that's all I have to say.
That was such a warm
Anything you
outro. I
yeah.
felt it right here.
Well, you have to. I'm so appreciative of our audience, and you have to reach out and say thank you
Yes,
every once in a while.
yeah.
And you have to lead them where to go.
In the most aggressive way
Yeah,
possible, you did that.
yeah. So by next week, I want to see 10 shares from everybody who watches this show. And I'm going to check too, damn
He will.
it.
He will. Trust me. I've known him long enough. He will do that.
I'm making a damn list. Hmm.
He also checked it
I'll
twice.
cut you off. Hmm.
I
All
guess
right,
that's it.
man.
All right. I'm Greg.
That's it. I'm not, and I'm Jeff, and we just gave you the hi hat.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.